I moved to that town because I didn't really have another choice. The company I worked for downsized our office and offered me a position in a small branch 3 states over. I told myself it would be temporary, a year at most, just long enough to get experience and then leave. The town itself was the kind of place you pass through without remembering one main street, 2 traffic lights, and a diner that somehow always looked closed even when it wasn't. Housing was cheap, which should have been my first red flag. The apartment complex I found sat at the edge of town, a tired 2-story brick building with 4 doors and a flickering security light that buzzed all night. The landlord, a gray-haired guy named Ron, told me I'd pretty much have the place to myself. I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't. When I moved in, 3 of the 4 units were empty. Mine was 2B, 2A, right next to me, was supposedly being prepared for a new tenant. Downstairs, both units were vacant. The hallways felt like they were built to hold more people than they ever would again. Every sound I made seemed too loud. The building didn't feel peaceful. It felt like it was waiting for something. The first few nights, I chalked the unease up to stress: new town, new job, unfamiliar creaks, but there was something off about the way sound traveled. A step in the hallway echoed a half-second too long. Doors never seemed to slam. They sighed shut like someone was trying not to wake a sleeping baby. At night, lying in bed, I could swear I heard faint breathing just beyond the walls, even though I knew I was supposed to be alone. "Relax," I would mutter to myself in the dark. "You're tired, that's all." But that excuse started to feel thin fast. It was about a month after I moved in when I first saw the light. I'd just gotten home from a late shift, around 10 p.m. The parking lot was empty except for my car and Ron's old pickup near the dumpster. I walked up the outdoor stairs, and as I turned the corner toward my door, I noticed a faint yellow glow under the door of 2A. I stopped. That unit had been dark and locked since I moved in. I knew because I passed it every single day. I stood there for a second, listening. No TV, no voices, no music. Just a soft, steady light leaking out from under the door, like it had always been there. "Okay," I whispered. "Guess someone finally moved in." I waited a couple minutes, pretending to fumble with my keys, half expecting to hear footsteps or a door open. Nothing happened, so I went into my place and tried to ignore it. But once I noticed, I couldn't unnotice. Over the next few days, the light in 2A would be on at strange times. Sometimes at 3 a.m., when I woke up to get water. Sometimes at 6 p.m. Sometimes totally dark for a full day, then suddenly on again in the middle of the night. About a week after I first saw the light, someone knocked on my door. 3 knocks, slow, evenly spaced, almost careful. It was just after 9 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. I froze for a second, then forced myself to answer it. The man standing there looked normal. Mid-30s maybe, average height, dark hair combed too neatly, wearing a plain gray hoodie and jeans. But his eyes were wrong. Not in a dramatic horror movie way, just a little too focused, like he was trying to see past my face and into my thoughts. "Hey," he said, smiling like we were old friends. "Finally caught you at home." Hey," I said. "You just move in?" He tilted his head, smile not changing. "Yeah, next door. We've talked before, remember? In the hallway?" I knew we hadn't. I would have remembered anyone else in that building. Something about the way he said it, like he was testing me, made my skin crawl. "I don't think so," I said. "But, nice to meet you." His smile lingered a second too long. Then he nodded. "Right. Must be my mistake. Anyway, I'm Mark." He said my name then. My actual first name. Casual. Smooth. Good to finally be neighbors. My name. Then he turned and went into 2A, closing the door gently behind him. I stood there in my doorway for a long time after, replaying that moment, trying to figure out how he knew my name when I never told him. Over the next few days, things got subtly worse. It wasn't anything huge right away, just little things that stacked on top of each other. I'd come home and see the blinds in 2A shift, like someone had just stepped away from the window. But by the time I got to my door, everything in that unit looked still and dark. Sometimes, when I walked down the hall, I'd notice the faintest shadow move under his door, like feet pacing. Whenever I stopped and listened, The building went dead silent. At night, lying in bed, I'd hear footsteps in the hallway outside my unit. Slow, patient steps, going from my door to the far end and back again. I told myself it was just Mark getting used to the building, but every time I checked the peephole, the hallway was empty. No doors closing, no one going downstairs. Just that buzzing security light outside and the hum of the old heater. I asked Ron about the new tenant a few days later when I ran into him in the parking lot. "So, the guy in 2A, I said. "When did he move in?" Ron squinted up at the second floor like he was trying to see through the bricks. "No one's in there yet," he said. "Still gotta fix a leak in that bathroom." "Why?" I hesitated. "I thought you said someone moved in." "I didn't," he said. "Just you on that floor. You okay?" I laughed it off. "Yeah, just tired. Maybe I heard you up there or something." But I knew it wasn't him. That night, the footsteps in the hall were louder, different tempo, less like walking, more like pacing, back and forth, back and forth. I stared at my ceiling, every muscle tense, counting the steps until they stopped right outside my door. The air on the other side felt thicker somehow, like whoever was there was leaning in, listening. Then, there it was again, 3 slow knocks on my door, deliberate, patient. I stayed frozen in bed and didn't answer. The knocks didn't come again, but I heard a low, almost amused exhale through the door. Not quite a laugh, more like someone thinking, "Okay, I'll wait." I gave it a couple days before I opened my door to him again. It was a Sunday afternoon, bright and cold, and I was on my couch, pretending to watch TV and trying not to think about moving. When the knock came this time, I already knew who it was. Same rhythm, same unsettling calmness. I opened the door a crack. Mark stood there, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets, that too wide smile pasted on his face. "Hey man," he said. "Sorry to bother you. Got a quick question. My kitchen light keeps flickering. Think you could take a look? I'm hopeless with that stuff." Under any other circumstance, that would have been the most normal neighbor request in the world. But something in his tone sounded off. Like he was reading off a script for the second or third time and was getting tired of saying the same line. "I'm not exactly an electrician," I said. "Just need another pair of eyes," he said, voice a little tighter. "You're not doing anything anyway, right? Come on, it'll take a second." Before I could answer, he'd already stepped aside and opened his door wide, like he expected me to walk in. I don't know why, but I took 2 steps forward and stopped right in the doorway, like I'd hit some invisible wall. The inside of 2A didn't look like anyone had moved in. Bare walls, no furniture, no boxes. Just old paint peeling in strips and a dark, wide stain in the middle of the living room carpet. It wasn't wet, but it looked soaked into the fibers, like whatever caused it had been there a long time. The air in there was colder than the hallway and had this sharp, metallic smell undercut by something damp and sour. It made me want to breathe through my mouth. "What happened to the floor?" I asked. He didn't even look at it. "Landlord's supposed to fix that," he said quickly. "Come on, the light's in the kitchen. You're already halfway in." His voice changed on that last sentence. It dropped, got tighter, like someone slipping out of character for a second. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I hadn't told him I was tired. I hadn't told him I wasn't doing anything. I hadn't told him my schedule, my habits, when I was usually home. But somehow, he always seemed to know. My body reacted before my brain did. I stepped backward, back into the hallway. "Actually," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual, "I've got a call I need to get back to. Sorry, man, maybe later." His smile vanished for a split second. His jaw clenched, and his eyes flattened into something cold and annoyed. Then the smile snapped back on, too bright. "Sure," he said. "Later then." I shut my door and locked it, hands shaking a little. As soon as the deadbolt clicked, I heard his footsteps. Not walking away, but rushing 1, 2, 3 quick steps right up to my door. The handle rattled, just once, hard. Then it stopped. He didn't knock. Instead, he spoke softly, almost like he was talking through a wall in a library. "Hey," he said. "Sorry if I came on too strong. It's just us up here, right, my name? Gotta look out for each other." He said my name again, like he was reminding me he had it. I pressed my back to the door and didn't answer. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear my own pulse in my ears. "Come on," he whispered. "You don't have to be scared. I've been here a long time, you know that." I hadn't known that, not until he said it. And suddenly, that was the worst part, because the way he said it didn't sound like he was talking about the apartment. It sounded like he was talking about me. I don't remember exactly when I decided to call the police. It was sometime after the whispering stopped and the hallway went quiet again. I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand for at least 15 minutes, arguing with myself. "You're overreacting. He's just weird. You'll look crazy." But the smell in that apartment, the way he knew my name, the stain on the floor, the fact that Ron insisted no one lived there, and that line, "I've been here a long time, you know that." It all kept looping in my head until I finally dialed. 2 officers showed up about 20 minutes later. A man and a woman, both looking more bored than alarmed when I opened the door. I told them everything. The footsteps, the knocks, the way he talked like we'd already met, how he knew my name, the empty apartment that didn't look lived in at all. I could hear how crazy it all sounded the second the words left my mouth. Still, to their credit, they took me seriously enough to at least check. The male officer knocked on 2A. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Still, nothing. He turned to Ron, who'd come up from his truck, looking confused and annoyed at having cops on his property. "You got a key for this one?" the officer asked. Ron frowned. "Why? Nobody's in there." I told him that. "Just open it," the female officer said. Ron unlocked the door. It stuck for a second, like it hadn't been opened in a while, then swung inward with a groan. They stepped inside first, flashlights out even though it was daylight. I stood in the hall with Ron, my stomach in my throat. The place didn't smell metallic anymore. It just smelled stale, like dust and old carpet. The stain was still there, but it looked faded and harmless in the beam of the flashlight. There was no furniture, no dishes in the sink, no signs of anyone ever having lived there recently. Cobwebs hung in the corners. The female officer opened the fridge. It was unplugged and empty. "How long has this been vacant?" she asked Ron. "Couple years at least," he said. "Last guy who lived here, well, let's just say it didn't end great. Took me a long time to get it back to code. Nobody's rented it since." The male officer looked at me, then at the stain. "What happened?" Ron shifted. "Guy died in here. No family. It was bad. But that was a long time ago." I swallowed. My tongue felt dry. "Did you say what he looked like?" I asked quietly. Ron shrugged. "Dark hair. 30s. Why?" The officers didn't find any sign of forced entry. No footprints in the dust, no fresh trash, nothing. According to their report, there was no evidence of current occupancy. They filed it as a suspicious complaint, told me to call again if anything else happened, and left. I moved out within the week. I didn't break the lease. I didn't argue with Ron. I just told him my job was transferring me again, and I needed to go. He didn't seem surprised. Even now, in a different city, different building, with neighbors I actually see and talk to, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I heard that same knock. 3 soft, even taps. Slow, patient, like it knows I'll answer eventually. Stupid as it sounds, I've caught myself avoiding mirrors at night, or skipping looking through the peephole if someone knocks after dark, because I keep thinking about one last detail I never told the cops. When he stood in my doorway that day and smiled at me, there was a flicker of something almost familiar in his face. Not like we'd met before, but like I'd seen him in the corner of my eye 100 times. In grocery store reflections, in dark car windows, in the blurred shapes behind my curtains when I was a kid and thought I was just being paranoid. My therapist used to say I didn't live, I scheduled existence. But for me, structure was the only thing that kept my head from slipping sideways. After a pretty bad breakdown a couple years back, we agreed I shouldn't be around chaotic environments for a while. Her phrase, not mine. So when I found a cheap 1-bedroom in an old brick building on the quiet side of town, it sounded perfect. No bar downstairs, no family with 3 kids above me. Just long, narrow hallways, a humming elevator that almost never worked, and rent low enough that I didn't ask too many questions. My therapist said, "This might be good for you. Predictable, stable." The place had a smell I couldn't place. Not gross, just stale, like someone's life had been paused there years ago and never restarted. The walls were thin, but the building was mostly empty. The landlord told me there were only a few other tenants, all long-term, all quiet types. The guy across the hall from me was one of them. I noticed him on my first morning there. Gray jacket, neutral expression, coffee cup in his right hand, key in his left. He stepped out of 4B at exactly 6:40 a.m., locked his door, nodded at me once, and walked down the hall without saying a word. It was so precise it felt rehearsed. People like that make me feel safer. They're like furniture in human form, reliable, predictable, part of the background. I started setting my own alarm for 6:35, just so I could watch him step out at 6:40. It meant the day was starting on time. It meant the world was still following rules. The noise started about a month after I moved in. By then, I had my routine memorized. Wake up at 6:35, hear his door open at 6:40, work at 8, dinner at 7, lights out by 11. My therapist would have been proud. The first night I heard it, I was almost asleep. It was close to midnight, lights off, TV silent. I was staring at the crack in the ceiling when I heard 3 soft taps in the wall behind my head. Not loud, not random, just tap, tap, tap. Same spacing, same gentle pressure, like someone counting, but not in a hurry. I lay there holding my breath, listening. Nothing else came. No pipes banging, no neighbor's TV, no footsteps in the hall. Just that short pattern. I told myself it was plumbing. Old buildings make sounds. Pipes rattle. Heat expands. I repeated that until I fell asleep. The next night, it happened again. Same time, almost down to the minute. 3 taps. Always 3. I turned on my phone screen and wrote it down in the Notes app because my therapist had taught me to track what's real when my brain felt slippery. Third night. 3 taps. Same wall. Same rhythm. I got up and put my ear against the paint. Nothing but silence and the faint hum of electricity. By the 5th night, I was half waiting for it, half dreading it. When it came tap, 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 I whispered, "Hello?" For no good reason, like an idiot. Of course, nothing answered. Eventually, I decided I should ask my neighbor. The guy in the gray jacket. He was the only other person on my floor I ever saw. If anyone was making that sound, it had to be him. I caught him one morning right after 6:40, just as he was locking his door. "Hey," I said, a little too quickly. My voice echoed more than I expected in the narrow hall. "You live in 4B, right?" He glanced at the number on his door like he was checking, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm in 4A, I said. "So, weird question. Have you been working on anything at night? Like hammering, knocking, whatever?" His brow furrowed, like I'd asked him to solve a math problem. "At night?" "Around midnight," I said. 3 taps. Always 3. It's been happening for a week. It sounds like it's coming from your side of the wall." He looked at me more closely then, eyes flicking over my face like he was trying to read something under my skin. "Have you missed any doses recently?" he asked quietly. That stopped me cold. "What?" "Your meds," he said. "Sorry, that was blunt. You mentioned it in the stairwell the other day. The new prescription, the adjustment period, sometimes that can cause auditory stuff." I stared at him. I had no memory of telling him that. Maybe I had. I'd been tired, carrying groceries up 4 flights of stairs. People talk when they're tired, but I hated how easily he'd said it. I hated that he assumed that was the explanation. "I'm not hallucinating," I said. It came out sharper than I meant. He held up his hands a little, like he was trying to calm a skittish animal. "Okay, just asking. I haven't been doing anything at night. I'm usually out cold by 10. If it happens again, maybe write it down. Sometimes patterns are—" "I already write it down," I said. "My therapist told me to." "Good," he said softly. He gave me a small, almost sympathetic smile and then walked past me toward the stairs. After that, I started seeing him in places that didn't feel right. One night, when I went down to get my mail around 11 p.m., he was standing in the stairwell, halfway between floors, not moving, just standing there, hands in his gray jacket pockets, staring at the crack where the wall met the ceiling. "Everything okay?" I asked. He blinked like I'd interrupted a thought. "Yeah," he said, "just listening." Then he brushed past me. His shoulder felt too cold through my sweater. Another time, I saw him sitting in his car in the parking lot, engine off, lights off, just sitting there, staring up at the windows like he was waiting for the building to do something. I watched him from my kitchen. He didn't look up at me, but somehow I still felt caught. The night he knocked on my door, it was around 9:30. I opened it a crack. He stood there, same jacket, same expression, but his eyes looked wired, too alert. "Hey," he said calmly, "I just wanted to check something." "Okay," I said. "Are you still hearing the countdown?" he asked. It took a second for my brain to catch up. "The what?" "The taps," he said softly. "The countdown. You said it was always 3. Are you still hearing it?" I never called it a countdown. Not to him. Not to anyone. My throat went dry. "No," I lied. It stopped. His shoulders loosened a little. He actually sighed in relief. "Good," he said. "That's good." He gave me that same small smile, but this time it didn't look sympathetic. It looked satisfied. Then he turned and went back into his apartment. That was when I decided he wasn't just some random quiet neighbor. He was involved. He was messing with me, gaslighting me, playing along with the delusions he assumed I had, and I wasn't going to let him. I got paranoid after that. I'll admit it. I started keeping my door locked even when I was home. I wrapped a piece of tape over the latch so I'd know if anyone messed with it. I laid a thin line of flour just inside the bottom of the door one night, just to see if any footprints showed up by morning. I hated myself while I did it, but I did it anyway. The taps kept coming, 3 at a time. Midnight, give or take a few minutes. Sometimes from the wall behind my bed, sometimes from the far corner near the radiator. One night I got angry enough that I slammed my own hand against the wall 3 times in reply, hard enough to sting my palm. The silence that followed felt mocking. A couple days later, I was cleaning behind the old radiator because I'd convinced myself something had died back there. Dust, coins, a dried-up pen cap, that's all I expected. What I found instead was a notebook. It was taped flat against the wall, behind the radiator, where you'd never see it unless you were deliberately looking. The tape had yellowed, but the notebook itself looked familiar. Same cheap brand I bought at the drugstore, same size, same color. I pulled it free with shaking hands. My name was written on the inside cover in my handwriting. Underneath, a date. Except the date was from 7 years ago. Long before I'd ever heard of this building. Long before I'd moved to this city. I flipped through the pages. Every line was filled. The handwriting was definitely mine. The phrasing sounded like me on a bad day. It was all there. Detailed entries about the man across the hall. The gray jacket. The nod at 6:40 a.m. The 3 taps at night. The countdown. My confusion. My suspicion. My decision to confront him. Only the dates were wrong. They started years before I'd moved in. And they repeated. Not like a diary over time, but like the same story written over and over again with tiny variations. The first page said, in capital letters, "If you're reading this, he's almost done transferring it." I read that line 5 times. My mouth went dry. "Transferring what?" I whispered. The more I read, the worse it got. There were entries where I talked about finding a notebook behind the radiator. Others where I said I refused to look. Some where the neighbor got angry. Some where he seemed sad. But the core pattern was always the same. Me moving in, needing structure, meeting the gray jacket man, hearing the taps, feeling watched. For a few minutes I honestly thought, this is it. Proof. He's been doing this to people before me. Writing about them. About me. Planting it. Rewriting. Like some experiment. Then the other thought hit. Or I've done this before. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my living room with all the lights on, the notebook open on my lap, waiting for the taps. When they finally came, 3 soft knocks from somewhere inside the walls, they felt less like noise and more like punctuation, like someone turning a page. I don't remember the exact moment everything collapsed. There are flashes, blue lights outside, a paramedic's face leaning over me, the landlord yelling in the background, me clutching the notebook so hard the pages crumpled. I woke up in a hospital bed with my wrists sore and a band around one arm. The room was white and too bright. For a second, I thought I was dead. Then a woman in scrubs walked in and said my name gently like she'd been practicing it. "You're in County General," she said. "Do you remember what happened?" "Neighbor," I said. My voice sounded wrong in my ears. "The man across the hall. He's doing something. The taps, the notebook. They're not hallucinations. They're not." She nodded in that way. People nod when they don't agree but don't want to argue. "The police were called by a passerby," she said. "They saw you at the window. You seemed distressed. When they went in, the building was not safe." "Not safe how?" "Condemned," she said. "Has been for years. No tenants. No working utilities. They're honestly still trying to figure out how you were living there without anyone noticing." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out high and thin. "There are tenants," I said. "My neighbor, 4th floor, gray jacket, he—" "There is no 4th floor," she said softly. "There's rubble where the top floors used to be. The fire was in 2013. They showed you the photos already. Do you remember?" I didn't. But they showed me again. Black and white pictures of my building. Its upper levels charred and half collapsed. No working elevator. No mailboxes. No cars in the lot. They showed me the notebook too. The one I'd found behind the radiator. It was in an evidence bag, edges frayed from how hard I'd gripped it. They let me hold it during one of the psychiatric evaluations. "This is yours," the doctor said. "All of it. Some of the entries go back almost 10 years. You've written about this neighbor before. Different cities. Different apartments. The details change, but the structure is always the same. You move in. You seek routine. The taps begin. The neighbor appears. A coping mechanism, he called it. A way to give form to the noise. To make your internal patterns feel external. Contained. I tried to accept that. I really did. It made sense. My brain likes patterns. It likes structure. If it can't find any, it will invent them. I could even see why my mind would pick a quiet, predictable neighbor as a character. Someone who made the world feel ordered until he didn't. For a while, I believed them. I took the meds. I went to group. I told my new therapist that yes, I understood the difference between what was real and what was imagined. I learned all the right words. Delusion, projection, transference. I said them out loud until they sounded harmless. Then, about a week into my stay, I woke up early. No reason. Just opened my eyes and knew it was near 6:40 a.m. without looking at the clock. Old habit, I guess. The hallway outside my room was quiet. Nurses' shoes squeaked on distant tiles. Someone down the hall coughed. I rolled onto my side and stared at the wall, thinking about how many times I'd done the same thing in that apartment, meaning to get up, to move on, but just staring. At exactly 6:40, a man in a gray jacket walked past my open door. Same jacket, same careful stride, same profile. He didn't look in at me. He didn't slow down. He just walked by like I was nothing more than another piece of furniture in his building. As he passed my room, he lifted his knuckles and tapped the wall 3 times. Soft, even, familiar. Then he kept walking. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise. I waited for someone else to react. A nurse, another patient, anyone. But the world outside my door went on like nothing had happened. Later, when I asked the staff about the guy in the gray jacket, they said no such person worked there. No visitors had checked in at that time either. Maybe it was a janitor, they suggested. Maybe a delivery guy. Maybe I'd been between sleep and waking. Maybe. I've always been the kind of person who thinks, that would never happen to me. You read those posts online about creepy encounters, home invasions, people vanishing between their front door and their car, and it all feels like fiction. I'd scroll past them late at night, lights off, TV humming in the background, feeling a little spooked but mostly entertained. That was other people's nightmare fuel, not mine. Back then, I was living alone in a 1-story rental house at the edge of town. Not the worst area, not the best, just cheap. I worked a boring office job, kept to myself, and my social circle had shrunk down to a few close friends after college. One of them was Thomas. We'd known each other since freshman year, same dorm, same crappy microwave, same late-night ramen runs. He was the only one who still showed up at my place on a random Friday with a six-pack and a "you alive, man" text. I won't lie, I liked the isolation. No roommates, no neighbors banging on the walls, just me and the quiet. I told myself it was peaceful, adult, responsible. In reality, I'd just gotten used to the comfort of believing that doors, locks, and familiarity were enough to keep danger away. I didn't double-check the deadbolt if I was expecting someone. I didn't look through the peephole every time. I told myself I would if something ever felt off. The problem is, by the time something feels off, you're usually already in it. You just don't realize until afterward that the whole time, the ground was already giving way under your feet. It started on a stormy Saturday night that wasn't supposed to be anything special. Just me, my best friend, a lot of cheap beer, and a long stretch of empty hours. I had no idea that would be the last night I ever felt truly safe in my own home. The rain had started in the afternoon, a steady gray curtain that made the street outside look like a watercolor painting. By night, it turned violent wind rattling the windows, rain slamming sideways, thunder rolling so close it made the glass buzz. It was the kind of storm that cancels plans, shuts down power, and makes you feel cut off from the rest of the world. Perfect drinking weather, Thomas had said over the phone. If the world ends, at least we'll be buzzed. He showed up a little after 9, jacket soaked, shaking rain off his hair as he stepped into my living room. He dropped a 12-pack on the coffee table with a grin. "Brought the good stuff," he said. "By good, I mean the stuff that was on sale." "Good enough," I replied, taking one and twisting the cap off. We sat on the couch, TV on low, some old horror movie playing more as background noise than anything. It was easy, familiar. We talked about work, his on-again, off-again girlfriend, my lack of any girlfriend at all, and how both of us were slowly becoming the kind of adults we used to laugh at. Around 11, there was a flash of lightning so bright it turned the room white, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that sounded like it hit the roof. The lights flickered, but stayed on. "Man," Thomas said, looking toward the window, "if the power goes out, I'm sleeping here. I am not driving in that." "You're not driving in that either way if we finish this," I said, pointing to the bottles. About half an hour later, he stood up and stretched. "Shit, I left my change of clothes in the car," he muttered. "I threw them in my back seat in case I crashed here. I'm not sleeping in these wet jeans, dude. I'll go grab them." "You want an umbrella?" I asked. He snorted. "I'll be fine. 5 minutes. Don't drink all the beer without me." Those were the last normal words he ever said inside my house. He grabbed his keys, slipped on his shoes, and headed to the front door. I heard it open, then the howl of wind and rain rushing in. The door clicked shut. I stayed on the couch, half watching the screen, half listening to the storm. A few minutes passed. I checked my phone. No texts. Lightning flashed again. Thunder shook the walls. Another minute. Another. I figured maybe he was checking something on his phone in the car, or scrolling, or just taking his time. Then, about 10 minutes after he'd left, there came a knock at the door. 3 quick raps. Not loud, not hesitant, just normal. And that was the moment stupid, small, thoughtless when I didn't look through the peephole. I just got up, walked to the door, and opened it. I expected to see Thomas standing there, wet hair, annoyed expression, maybe joking about how he almost got blown away. The person at my door was not Thomas. He was taller, maybe 6'2", wearing a black hooded jacket that looked soaked through, water streaming off the shoulders. His jeans were dark and clinging to his legs from the rain. He had one foot already over the threshold, like he'd been in the process of stepping inside before I even got the door fully open. He was smiling. Not a big toothy grin, just this small fixed smile that didn't touch his eyes. His eyes were the first thing that made me uneasy. They were flat, watchful, like he was waiting for something. Can I help you?" I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't even blink, as far as I could tell. He just stood there, that 1 foot over my welcome mat, his hands in the pockets of his jacket, shoulders slightly hunched from the rain. Water dripped off his hood onto my floor. "I think you've got the wrong house, man," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm good, thanks." He tilted his head maybe half an inch, still smiling, still silent. Something in my brain finally woke up. This wasn't a neighbor, not that I recognized. No Uber driver would stand like that, half inside, not saying anything. No delivery guy would be empty-handed, and no friend behaves that way. Okay, I said, a little sharper. You need to back up. He didn't move. It was like he either didn't hear me or was waiting to see what I'd do next. The rain behind him roared. The hallway light above us buzzed quietly. His gaze flicked once past me, like he was looking into the house, and that tiny movement snapped something in me. I put my hand on the door and pushed. You need to get off my porch, I said. There was this half second of resistance, his weight still leaning forward before he finally took one small step back, just enough for me to close the door. His expression never changed. He didn't argue, didn't apologize, just watched the door closing in his face. I clicked the deadbolt and stood there, palm flat against the wood, heart suddenly speeding up. I listened. Nothing. No retreating footsteps. No knock. Just the storm. Probably some drunk idiot, I muttered to myself. Still, I moved away from the door slower than usual. The uneasy feeling gnawed at me, but I tried to shake it off. I went back to the couch, picked up my beer, and grabbed my phone to text Thomas. Dude, some random guy just showed up at my door. You coming back or you drown out there. Message failed to send. No signal. The storm must have knocked something out, because the little bars at the top of my screen were gone. I told myself that was fine. He'd be back any second. Maybe he was circling the block to park better. Maybe he was on a call. Maybe I was just letting that weird guy at the door get in my head. 5 more minutes passed. 10. Still no Thomas. That creeping feeling in my stomach stopped being a feeling and turned into certainty. Something was wrong. I grabbed my keys and decided to check outside. When I stepped out onto my small front porch, the storm hit me like a wall. Rain stung my face. Wind shoved at my chest. I squinted through it toward the curb where Thomas had parked. His car was still there, headlights off, dark and unmoving through the sheets of rain. Thomas! I yelled, but the wind ate my voice. I hurried down the short walkway, sneakers slipping slightly on the slick concrete. I reached his car and pulled on the driver's door handle. It was locked. I cupped my hands against the side window and peered in. His phone sat on the passenger seat, screen dark. No sign of him. My chest tightened. Nobody leaves their phone in the car in weather like this, not when they're planning to come right back inside. I looked up and down the street. No one. Just trees bending in the gusts and the glow of a distant streetlight blurred by rain. I suddenly felt very exposed out there. I hurried back to the house, water running down my neck, and shoved the door open, stepping into the dimly lit entryway. I closed it fast, locked it, and leaned against it, trying to process what the hell was happening. I flipped on the small lamp in the living room. The hallway light that should have lit the path to the bedrooms and the back door was off. I didn't remember turning it off. It was just a dark strip cutting through the house. Thomas? I called out, even though I knew he wasn't there. My voice sounded small. That was when I saw it. About halfway down the hallway, pressed flat against the wall like he was trying to become part of it, was a shape, a person. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I saw the outline of a shoulder, the faint glint where the streetlight outside caught something wet. His hood was down now. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I knew that shape. Not personally, but instinctively. It was the man from the door. Hey, I barked, my voice cracking. Who the hell are you? Get out of my house. He stepped forward, slowly, not rushing, not lunging, just one foot in front of the other, eyes locked on me. Rainwater had soaked through his clothes. He left faint footprints on my hardwood floor. His expression was the same unsettling half-smile, like this was some casual visit. Then he raised his right arm. At first, I didn't process it. It just looked like something long and black in his hand, pointing in my direction. I thought maybe it was a flashlight, or a pipe, or something. My brain didn't want to label it. It didn't click. What are you doing, man? I said, backing up a step, my voice shaking now. Get out. I'm calling the cops. He didn't answer. He just kept that arm up, straight and steady, aimed at my chest. His posture was calm, almost relaxed, which somehow made it worse. The silence pressed in around us, thicker than the darkness. I didn't recognize the gun. Not really. I mean, I've seen guns in movies, on TV, in video games, but in real life, held by a stranger in your dim hallway, it doesn't look the same. It just looks wrong, heavy, final. My mind was still 2 beats behind reality, skipping over the obvious. Some part of me wanted to keep negotiating, keep reasoning, like this was a misunderstanding. Another part, some buried animal instinct started screaming inside my skull. Move. That instinct won. I turned and ran. I don't remember every step I took after that. It's more like flashes. Running barefoot across the living room, my wet socks sliding on the floor, fumbling with my phone, hands shaking so hard I could barely hit the screen. Diving behind the kitchen counter as something slammed into the wall behind me, not a gunshot, I realized later, but his shoulder hitting the drywall when he lunged, and I changed direction faster than he expected. I punched 911 with my thumb, pressed the phone to my ear, whispering, "Come on, come on, come on, 911. What is your emergency?" A calm female voice answered. "There's a man in my house," I blurted out, voice breaking. "He's got a gun, I think. I don't know. He was at my door. My friend's missing. His car is outside. Please, please." "Sir, I need you to stay as calm as you can," she said. "What is your address?" I gave it to her, tripping over the numbers. I could hear faint footsteps in the hall, then silence, like he was listening, trying to locate me. "Officers are on their way," she said. "Can you safely exit the house?" "I don't know where he is," I whispered. "He's between me and the front door." "Is there a back door? A window?" I thought of the small window over the kitchen sink. It opened onto my fenced backyard. It wasn't big, but I might be able to squeeze through if I had to. "Yes," I whispered. "There's a window. Can you get to it quietly?" I eased myself up just enough to peek over the counter toward the hallway. Nothing. Just darkness and the faint outline of the doorway. He wasn't there, or he was pressed against the wall again. I couldn't tell. "I'm going to try," I said. The dispatcher kept talking, her voice a low, steady stream in my ear, telling me officers were less than 5 minutes away, telling me to move slowly, telling me they were with me. I remember being irrationally afraid that if I breathed too loud, he'd hear it over the storm and the faint hum of the fridge. I unlocked the kitchen window and pushed it up, wincing at the small squeak it made. The wind shoved rain in instantly, cold and sharp against my face. I put one leg up, then the other, scraped my shin on the frame, and half fell, half scrambled into the wet grass outside. From there, everything sped up. Red and blue lights flickering through the rain like broken lightning. Shouting. Officers with guns drawn, barking commands as they rushed up my driveway. One of them grabbed my arm, dragged me further away, told me to stay behind the squad car. I saw my front door burst open, saw 3 dark figures move inside, heard them yelling, "Police, drop the weapon, show me your hands." There was no gunshot, no scream, just more shouting, more movement, then nothing. A long, tense, empty silence. After what felt like forever, an officer came back out, jaw tight. "We saw him," he said. "We chased him out the back. He ran through your yard and cut through the alley. We lost him in the storm. They found the back fence gate wide open, muddy footprints in the grass, a partial shoe print near the alley, but no man, no gun. Nothing else disturbed inside, aside from my scattered belongings and the damage from me running like a panicked animal. An ambulance showed up next, but not for me." About 20 minutes later, another patrol car pulled up with a soaked, shaking figure in the back seat. It was Thomas. They'd found him a little over a block away in a parked car that wasn't his. He'd been tied up, wrists bound with what looked like some kind of plastic cord, a strip of duct tape stuck loosely to his neck, like whoever did it never finished the job. He was wet, pale, and terrified. When they brought him under the awning of my porch, he looked at me with wide eyes. "Dude," he said, voice hoarse, "I didn't even make it to my car. He grabbed me as soon as I stepped off your porch." Later, at the station, he explained it in more detail. How the guy had come out of nowhere from the side of the house. How he'd pressed something hard into Thomas's back and said, "Don't scream," in this flat, almost bored voice. How he'd led him down the street in the rain, shoved him into the back seat of another car, tied him up, and told him, "Stay quiet, I'll be right back." The plan, as far as anyone could tell, was simple and chilling. Grab Thomas first so he couldn't interrupt, then come back to the house for me. The officers asked me the same questions over and over. Could I describe his face? His voice? Any tattoos? Scars? I could only give them pieces. The smile. The stillness. The way he moved like he had all the time in the world. One detective asked, "When he pointed the gun at you, how close was he?" I paused. I thought about that moment in the hallway, about the long black shape in his hand, about how my brain just refused to name it for what it was until I started running. I didn't recognize it as a gun at first, I admitted. I just knew it was bad. I don't know how else to explain it. He nodded slowly, like he'd heard that before and wished he hadn't. They never caught the guy. They had a description, some half-useless security footage from a nearby gas station of a man in a hood walking past, and a few muddy prints, but no solid ID, no arrest. Eventually, the case just sat, open but cold. Weeks later, after the adrenaline faded, after I moved out of that house and into an apartment with too many locks, I started replaying that hallway moment in my head, over and over. People tell me, "You did the right thing. You ran. That's why you're alive." And logically, I know they're right. But there's a thought that still keeps me up at night, one I can't shake no matter how many times I try to rationalize it away. If I had recognized the gun instantly, if my brain had fully understood, in that exact second, that I was looking down the barrel of something that could kill me, would I have frozen instead of running? Would fear have locked my knees and shut my mouth? Would I have just stood there, heart exploding, waiting to see what he'd do? And if that's true, if ignorance was the thin, stupid little thing that got my body moving before fear pinned me in place, then the only reason I'm here to tell this story is because, in the worst moment of my life, I didn't understand how much danger I was actually in.